Deep down, we all love to win.
On your mark.
Growing up as an athlete, I believe winning was crossing the finish line before a competitor. But then I joined the Marines. I discovered that winning isn't a competition between you and others. It's you versus you every single day. And words like integrity, service, loyalty, passion, they grew wings and became a hurricane force to live by with every breath. Suddenly, every sunrise presented the chance to win, requiring only one entrance fee: the confidence to believe in myself, to take the risks before me. And there it was. Risk.
Our next speaker is New York Times bestselling author Angie Witkowski.
It's what I see every day in meetings with CEOs, startups with hundreds of millions on the line, legacy teams stretching from coast to coast. Those who have the drive to win and make a difference in the world, but whose team members have no bars on their shoulders, no specific title on the organization chart. Their only entrance fee is risk. And often, in the most challenging of times, they hold back, slow down, stop running as fast, because everything feels like it's on the line. And maybe it is. It's in these moments, when success feels fleeting and the odds seem insurmountable, that I do my best work with clients. Because we can lend our courage to one another. We can try it on and feel the loyalty of another, wear their belief like a warm coat, and in the process find our own confidence. It's then that leaders spark cultures, redefine industries, and find the ultimate form of winning. The knowledge that when everything was on the line, they were willing to take the risk, and in doing so, find their greatness on the other side. I think the most important thing you learn in the Marine Corps is how you measure success. And in the military, certainly there's mission accomplishment, but the worst thing that can happen is people die. And that changes you when you go to work in the private sector, when you're like, what's the worst thing that can happen? I started working in pharmaceutical sales. I had the easiest job in the world, too. Like, I left active duty in the Marine Corps in 2001. I actually left 10 days before 9/11. And I started working in pharmaceutical sales. I had the easiest job in the world. I was selling Viagra in Beverly Hills. And my joke is like, it wasn't a hard job to do. Anne said I could be a little bit, we could swear a little bit. And so like you like see like what people would get worked up about, and you're like, well, is anybody gonna die? Nobody's gonna die. Like, this isn't a big deal. This is, we might miss a sales quota. People will be disappointed, but we're gonna be okay. And so I think that for me gave me a unique perspective on, I think, risk and cost of loss and things like that. And I think that really helped. And I think that with that, around that time in my career, it bolstered me I think it to be a little bit bolder with some of the personal choices too, starting a business and writing a book and going down that path.
I mean, the confidence that you must have gained being able to prove that physical capability that you needed to. And I was really interested. I never really thought about this with you, and I can't believe all these times we never talked about this part, but that all of the physical demands are based on a test for a man that's 5'9", and you're 5'3", and that you did it. And I was reading that part, I was like, yes! I'm like, you're such a badass. So.
It's so funny though, because what you learned, and I write about it in Bet on You, is that the things that I couldn't train for in Marine Corps training was height. And all the obstacles are designed for the average male height, as is much of the gear, like even your like rifle and pistol. And it seems simple, but like a pistol grip, I've got really small hands. And I've written about this in my other books too. Like, Marine Corps training is really challenging. I think we can all appreciate that. But it wasn't necessarily the physical challenge, like the running and the hiking. I'm a pretty athletic person. Sometimes it was the jumping and grabbing the obstacle, and sometimes it was just not being good. And I think about officer candidate school, which is kind of like a boot camp for officers. Then you go to this like 6-month infantry school where you're learning so much about maneuvering and defensive and offensive positions, just things that I grew up with Barbies. They married G.I. Joe, but he'd go off to war, she'd go after a career. It was just kind of how things really worked out. And so I was just struggling all the time just to comprehend, like, okay, why does this matter? How does this fit in? And so it was really the first time in my life that I ever struggled. And I remember talking to one of my instructors about it, and he's just like, hey, everybody struggles with something. This is just your thing. And that was really kind of enlightening. The hard thing was understanding that you had no choice to get through it, but they were going to be there for you, and that was really wonderful. At the time, we're no longer married. I was married to a Marine. We were living on the West Coast. He got reassigned to the East Coast, and I had to switch jobs. And because my company didn't have an opportunity where we moved. And so it took a couple months to find another pharmaceutical job. I wasn't selling Viagra. I was selling some osteoporosis product, and which is important, but it was... and I was making like really good money, and I had a company car. I just wasn't happy. And I think like the big connection was that there was something missing about service orientation to my life. And a woman who had served within the Marine Corps, she was making a lot of money in Washington, D.C. as a lawyer on K Street. She wasn't happy. And she is really great at igniting things. I'm really good at kind of seeing them through. So that was our partnership. So I was driving somewhere in North Carolina. I was talking to Courtney, who's been the co-author, my business partner, for almost 20 years. We were just talking about how miserable our lives were. I mean, in reality, it wasn't really miserable. It was actually pretty good lives, but there was just still something missing. And we had just seen somebody who was like a peer starting a business and kind of writing on leadership. And we just had this thought like, well, I know them. They're not smart. Why can't we do that? And then Courtney asked the question, like, if not us, then who? If people around us are doing kind of the things that we want to do and we're looking at them, what's the difference between them and us? And we just kind of isolated it to, they're willing to take a risk. They're willing to sacrifice something. And for us at the time, it was sacrificing our time. Neither of us had really, I was an English major, but I'd never written anything, I'd say substantial. I, maybe wrote a 20-page paper in college, but nothing like a book. And so we started writing on weekends and in evenings, and neither of us had kids at the time, so we did have some margin in our life to do that. And we would give each other feedback, we'd pass our work back and forth, and it was awful. It was so awful. And then we said, no, we really need like a partner. So Courtney and I were like, well, we need really a literary agent who believes in us, who can get us into a publisher. So we put together this really crappy proposal. And I say it's really crappy because we're like, okay, give us pictures. And I gave her like this, for this proposal, like a stupid picture. And she actually gave her wedding portrait for the picture. And I'm like, why are you choosing this picture? She's like, it's my best one. I'm like, this is, and it was a beautiful portrait. She spent a lot of money on it. But like, that was how bad our proposal. But we'd sent it to like 30 different agents, and one called us back. He's like, I get what you're trying to do. Your proposal's awful. So he acknowledged that. And then he's like, but there's a way to make this work. And this was really before military writers were really like the jackos in this world, like were publishing their work. And so we had a hook, and he got us connected to an offer with a publisher. It wasn't a great offer, but it was good enough for us to say, oh, we can do this. And he's like, if you start a business, if you start talking about your book, you're going to have opportunity. And so we decided to not overnight quit our jobs, but slowly transition into building, starting our company, Lead Star, and then writing our book. And it's different. Like for nonfiction writers like me, it's different for fiction writers. If you're a fiction writer, you have to submit your whole manuscript. If you're a nonfiction writer, you only have to do like a chapter and your introduction and a marketing plan. And so we had that, and he took a risk on us. We took a risk on us, and I'd like to say it magically happened over 2 years, but it was about a 2-year process. He chains himself to his desk. I think my best kind of concept is I write when I can. Mm-hmm. And to me, like the morning hours before people aren't awake in the house, I'm writing. So from like 5 to 8 is really when my brain sometimes works best. But I think when you have a deadline, that's powerful motivation that you find the time that may not work best, but gets the job done. And so I write when I can. I don't necessarily have a process, but I do have some magic hours. And I love the morning. I feel like that's, your cup of coffee, clarity, it's quiet. That's when I spend a lot of time. But for Bet on You, we wrote it during the pandemic. I just had a lot of, I don't want to say like white space, but there was a lot of just, sitting in my bedroom late at night writing because, we had all this apparently time to kill and write a book. And so that's a funny thing about Bet on You. It was a book that Courtney and I had conceptualized before the pandemic, but didn't have the time to write and complete. And our agent was really excited about it. But again, we just didn't have the time to complete. But because of the pandemic, our business, we lost a tremendous, so before the pandemic, our business was, we travel to client sites, we deliver events, and to large groups of people. But when the pandemic hit, in a matter of 5 days, we lost about $500,000 worth of business. And it was gut-wrenching. And so suddenly my calendar was clear, and we were broke. And so we had to then transition. And, again, fortunately, PPP and everything helped us support our team and our staff, but it was devastating. Yeah. But it presented an opportunity. During the pandemic, I read anybody here read Flea's book from the Red Hot Chili Peppers? I know Judge did. Yeah, my son. I love, that's my favorite genre in this world is rock stars who write their own autobiographies. Anyway, I really liked his book because he would have a page chapter, and it took the pressure off of you of having to finish a chapter. And I think people's attention spans too. So the way that we structured it was in 3 parts. The first thing that we really wanted to do was to reintroduce this concept of risk-taking into people's lives. The second was helping people plan and prepare for risk. So it wasn't just go buy into the concept of risk. It was really how to do it. And the third part is really recognizing the biggest risk blockers in this world is fear and the fear of failure. And so kind of helping you see these enemies that you're going to meet in the future and how to deal with them. We also wanted to sprinkle it with stories because that's been a consistent throughout our book is telling stories. But this one was interesting. We didn't just tell our stories. We told stories of people that you may or may not know. Katie Bertudato made it. I don't know if you all know her in the community, but she runs Golden Swan. Locally, she made it in because she's got a really tremendous story. And we also talk about Dolly Parton and The Rock. So we got some really popular people too. So we just wanted to make it bite-sized, practical, and actionable, I think was what. I love this story so much, and discovering it was one of the best things about doing research for this. And so the way that we write in this book is not just talking about risking in career, because we're not just one-dimensional people. We talk about a kaleidoscope approach to risking. And so in the book, with that kaleidoscope, what makes a kaleidoscope so beautiful is its chambers and balanced pieces, and we think it's a great metaphor for living our life. So it's not just risking in your career, going for the promotion, the negotiation, all those things. It's also about risking in your life. Maybe it's fitness, or you want to learn how to bake better like me. I'm always trying to learn how to cook better. HelloFresh has been a real lifeline for me, teaching me how to cook better. But there's also risking for impact, in that is service in your community or service anywhere, because we are a part of a community, and I do think there's an obligation to give back. And also, thinking about these different areas of our lives, just risking for joy is one of the final things we write about, because that part of it makes it all worth it. If we're not loving our lives, if we're not enjoying our lives, what's the point? So this is a story about risking in career, and it's about Dolly Parton. And you may not know this story, but it is wonderful. And the subtitle is Say No to the King and Yes to the Queen. And this is about sticking to your priorities and your values and living your life on purpose. So one of our favorite no stories comes from Dolly Parton, the singer and original singer of the famed song, I Will Always Love You. Dolly has shared in interviews that she knew the song was special when she released it in the early 1970s and watched it rise to the top of the charts. Shortly after its release, Elvis Presley approached Dolly to record the song, a flattering and validating proposition. Dolly was definitely interested until she was told by his manager it was typical for Elvis to retain half of the publishing rights to any song he performed.
That caused Dolly to pause. In the music business, it's well known that the songwriter, not the singer, is the one who often benefits greatest from a hit. And Elvis's song would definitely be a hit. Yet his success with her music would require her to forfeit something she valued greatly, her ownership of the song she created. Dolly turned down the request. She told the king no, passing up on an opportunity to earn a lot of money. But she knew there was something more valuable than cash: her integrity, her vision for herself, her standards, and her own personal expectations. What's more, and what makes this move so gutsy, Dolly made this decision without any knowledge that 20 years later, a movie called The Bodyguard would come around. Whitney Houston would record the song, not ask for any rights, and her version would smash Billboard's records. Dolly would later say that Whitney's success with her music made her enough money to buy Graceland. Isn't that just powerful? I think the first thing is that when people hear the word risk, they have this impression that it's go to the bank, take out my money, go to Turtle Creek, put it on Red 21, and with like a spin of the roulette, you either win or lose. And so I think that's misconception number one, that we often see risk as the opposite of reward. Risk versus reward is how we get that presented to us all the time. But if you think about the most significant things that ever happened to your life, it required risk. So don't think about risk versus reward. Think about risk is the path to reward. And it's funny about this stage in our life, because again, if you've been married before, if you have kids before, like those are like huge risks, or even going to college, it's a huge risk. Like, success rate in college is 50%. And if you told me, hey, Angie, you're going to take this plane to Tampa and it's got a 50% chance of landing on a runway, I would say no. I would say no. I wouldn't send you off with, soap and a robe, the dictionary, all those things that we do. But so what makes these things unique about this stage in our life is like the choices that are in our minds are more like less society approved. Not a lot of people are doing it. But probably the chances of success are greater because you've thought on it and they're like really authentic to you. So again, risk is that path to reward. The second thing is that we think about risk as a leap. And I think our society celebrates rip the Band-Aid, quit your job, change your life, make these big, bold, epic strokes. But those just don't work. It's like, you don't have to show of hands here, but if you've ever watched 90 Day Fiancé, the reason you watch that show is because it's a bad idea. It's terrible. It's a lovely drama, but it's not going to work. It's not sustainable. So risk done right isn't a leap. It's a series of steps. You got to think about it. You got to process it. And you have to slowly buy into the behaviors to make it successful. So some of the it's like those people that we say are overnight successes really was like 10 years in the making. Like success takes time, so be patient with that. The final thing is that we think that we can avoid risk. And you hear that, I don't take risks. These are often the same people who haven't been to the doctor in 2 years, and maybe they have a family history of cancer, or they think like I'm just gonna hide out in my house and not realize we're humans, we need community. Or maybe they have all their, stock in one company. So it's like we take risks. And so if we have risks that surround us, shouldn't we know something about it?
Yeah.
Shouldn't we use this to benefit our lives? And so it's just a decision. That's the final point about risk, is that it's not this big thing. It's just a decision followed by action that gets you on the path.